All right, guys, so this section, we are going to look at the SBA guide. Now, the SBA guide is to give you a guide as to how to actually carry out your SBA. So I'm going to read through this guide with you. And if there is any question that you would like to get clarified, you can ask me at the end of going through this presentation. All right. So there is a link that you can go to find out more about SBA ideas and topics. So here, there's a link up here that you can use. Now, the purpose of the SBA project, all right? So we're going to start off looking here. Now, in the view of CSEC and mathematics teachers across the region, that students are not transitioning fluently enough from school maths to real-world application. This has caused many governments to invest and train members of education system in the delivery of STEM and STEAM approach in an attempt to bridge that gap between the real world and the classroom. All right, so what all of this is saying is that from a classroom experience, they are saying that normally when we teach math to students, most of the time they don't really see how the math that they learn apply to the real world. And so they come up with this SBA component to give students a real world experience of how to apply the maths. So the project really is to get you to do something from a real world point of view so that you can apply what you learn from maths. So that's what the SBA is about. They need to see that you're able to apply the maths that you learn to real world, and as well as to demonstrate that you understand how to apply it. All right, so the mathematics SBA is an attempt by CSEC to bridge that same divide and forever link real world, everyday mathematics to the theoretical concept discussed in the classroom. In CSEC's own words, the project may require the candidate to collect data or demonstrate the application of mathematics in everyday situation. All right, so in terms of the SBA structure, we will be looking at these headings. Now the SBA must have the following heading. So one, it must have a project title. Right? Now we want to see what it is that a project title should be. All right? The project title, it should be clear and concise and relate to a real world problem. The title may be in the form of a question or a precise and declarative statement of intent. This statement of intent is also called an hypothesis, right? Now, so it is two things that your title should have. Not two things, one out of two things. The title can either be a question or it can be a declarative statement. All right. So if you, for instance, can somebody give me an idea of your SBA topic? Would someone share their SBA topic?
Say lunch money.
All right, lunch money. All right. Now, for your title, you want to either come up with a question about lunch money, right? So that's one way you could approach a title. Or you could make a declarative statement about lunch money, right? Now, when you make a statement, you're claiming something. And whatever you claim can either be true or false, right? So let us think first of a question. How would you formulate a question for the title? So lunch money, you could ask the question, do students, or you could ask, is
What do students use their lunch money to do?
yeah, that could be a question. Or you could ask the question, is the lunch money that students are given by their parents, is the lunch money sufficient to buy the lunches available at school, right? So you could come up with a question like that. Now, your question will be a question that you will have to do a research on. When you do a research, it means that you'll have to go and carry out a survey and collect some information. So the question that you ask, you're now going to create a survey to collect data. Now, that question that you have as a project title, you're not going to ask the students that question. But what you're going to do, you're going to make a number of questions that will collect information relating to your project title. All right, so for instance, Shay, what was your question again?
What are stuff that children do with their lunch money?
What are stuff?
Sir, I think it's something close to that.
What are stuff? You have to be a little bit more. Remember that they said that it should be clear and concise. Stuff is not very clear. So when you say something a little bit more definitive, you might want to find out what are the things that students buy with their lunch money.
Okay, so what are the things that students purchase with their lunch money?
Right. And you can make it a little bit more in a context of at school, right? So what are some of the things students buy with their lunch money at school? That would be a little bit more general, but if you're going to narrow it down to say lunch, you could say, what are the different types of lunches that students buy with their lunch money? You get what I'm saying, Shay?
Yes, sir.
All right, so if you're asking that question, what are the different types of lunches that students buy with their lunch money? Now, clearly, you will want to find out from the students what are the different types of lunches, right? So, of course, you're going to make a list of lunches that you think would be available for students to buy. You're going to make some column where you can record and tally the amount of students who would want a particular lunch, right? So if you have, say, one lunch is patty and cocoa bread, and another lunch is bun and cheese, another lunch would be probably chicken, cooked chicken, or so on. So you could list the different types of lunch, then you take a survey from the students by asking the question, which type of lunch do you prefer? And you will ask the students to give you their opinion or their feedback on the lunch they prefer to spend their money on. And then now you would collect that data Now, after you collect that data, you would make some charts in terms of either a pie chart or a bar chart to show which lunch would be more, or which of the lunch is purchased more by the students. All right, so is everybody clear on what a project title would be? Now, instead of asking a question for a project title, you could make a declarative statement. Now, when you make a statement, you're claiming, you're making a claim. What would you claim that students use their lunch money to buy? All right, you make a claim that most students only use their lunch money to buy bag juice and banana chips. That's a claim. Is it true or false? Then no, you're going to have to ask some questions surrounding that. So you would probably make questions like, you would ask students, you could probably ask a question like, all right, let me think. So you could probably come up with a question like, do you spend your money to buy bag juice or banana chips and so on when it is lunchtime? Because you're making a claim, or if you could find out, if you don't want to ask the students if they buy banana chips or bag juice, you could ask the student, what do you generally use your money to buy for lunch? Now, you would want to collect that data. You don't have to put the bag juice and banana chips there. But when you collect the data now, you're going to see whether or not you will have a lot of students buying bag juice and banana chips. So if you see most of the students buy bag juice and banana chips in terms of when you collect the data, then that means your claim would be true. If you don't get most, but less, you get instead you get a few students only buy bag juice and banana chips, then that would indicate that your claim would be false, right? So in that case where you're making a claim, then you're collecting data to prove whether or not your claim is correct or it is incorrect. Any question about that?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. So remember that lunch money is not only about spending. Remember, you have students like myself who save from their lunch money as well.
Exactly. So you are going to ask these questions to bring out that. So that's some of the things that you have to consider. So now that you say, all right, maybe students don't use all of the money for lunch. So you would say, how much money you put aside for your lunch, and what do you use the rest of your money to do? Do you spend all your lunch money on lunch? Do you buy other things with your lunch money and so on? What are some of the other things that you use your lunch money by? So those are questions that you could ask. Now, in doing so, you want to come up with at least, they say at least 15 questions. I would suggest that if you can come up with about 20 questions, that the more questions you have, it gives you a better reflection of what really is happening. So your data will be more accurate with more questions. All right. Now, if you just want to use a few, well, don't use less than, I would say, don't use less than 20 questions. So you just have to think about all the questions that you're going to ask surrounding your topic. Bearing in mind that you want to be able to put these questions on different charts, right? All right, moving along.
So how many charts should we use? One?
No, you're not going to use only one. You're going to use a number of charts. You're going to use, go ahead, some. You're going to use pie charts, bar charts, and so on, based on what you've seen in the sample. A matter of fact, I will bring up one of the sample and go through it after I've gone through these. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
So you're saying don't use less than 20 questions. You're referring to that of the questionnaire?
Depending on what method you're using to collect your data, Ms. Wilson. So if you're using
because I'm using the questionnaire.
Right.
So I just have to find some more questions.
Yeah, if you're using a question, how many questions that you would have collected?
12, sir.
All right. Don't go less than 15. So at least 3 more questions. All right. Okay. So I would say between 15 and 20 questions would be okay. All right, so everybody should have an idea now what the project title should be. Now, this project title must be in your writing now when you're writing the SBA. So when we look at as the sample, we will understand what is happening. Now, the introduction. Now, in the introduction for the project should be well thought out and should be a comprehensive description. A comprehensive description. Everybody should know what that is, how to describe. Comprehensive description of the project itself. So in your introduction, you're going to give a overall description of what the project is. All right, it should set the background for what you intend to do. The objectives, it should point out what the objectives you are trying to accomplish. Whatever you plan to accomplish from the experiment, you should list those. What is it that you're trying to find out, your objectives? Now, these should be stated in the introduction as well. So in your introduction, you should have a comprehensive description. You should have a background. You should have objectives that you're trying to accomplish. And you should state all of these you should have in your introduction. And they should be what? Very clear and precise. That means you shouldn't have any confusion about what you're saying. All right, so after you do your introduction, then you need to be able to say what method you use to collect your data. So the method that you use to collect your data needs to be stated clearly here. If you plan to use a survey or a questionnaire, an experiment, or an investigation. So note here now, you don't all have to use survey in terms of collecting your data, right? So you can just use either an investigation. Investigation, you're still going to collect some data, but it doesn't have to be in the form of a questionnaire or so on. All right? Now, a survey, what's the difference between a survey and a questionnaire? Anybody?
Sir, surveys like based on your observation, right?
All right, a survey is really going to collect data. You can use a questionnaire in your survey, but survey is when you do a first-hand collection of data, meaning that you actually go directly to where you're collecting the data, and you may collect data either by questionnaire, you can collect it by interview, or so on. All right. you must ensure that your method is free from flaws, and as flawed method will lead to an unreliable data. If your data is unreliable, then whatever conclusion you come up with will be flawed. Take some time to talk with your teacher, advisor, facilitator to make sure that your data collection method is sound. The instrument that you intend to use to gather the data should be stated here. Blank tables with heading, survey questions, diagrams, general calculations, and so on. What this is saying here, your data, your method of data collection in this part of the SBA, you should state what you should state. The instrument that you intend to use to gather the data, you should state them here. What are the instruments you use? You can use blank table with heading, survey with questions, diagrams with general calculation. All of these must be included in this part of the presentation. Method of data collection. Now, after you have collected the data now, next thing you want to do, so most of what you collected in data are going to be in the form of some tables. Now, from those data that you collect and put in tables, now you're going to make your charts from them. And so when you make your charts, like your pie charts or your bar charts or so on, you are going to present the presentation of the data now going to come in this form. All right. The presentation of your data needs to be accurate and well organized. You may have used a survey or a table to collect your initial information. This table needs to be properly laid out with appropriate columns, headers that describe exactly what you do, what you are doing. In addition to the table, you will need to have at least one graph that shows your data. So in other words, your presentation can be in the form of graph. You may also you may use any type of appropriate statistical graph, bar charts, pie charts, line graph, histogram, etc. Your graphs need to be well labeled in terms of their axis. Don't overlook that part, students. You have to label your graph and your tables, right? So in terms of your presentation of data, what are we expecting here? We are expecting either some statistical graph, bar chart, pie charts, linear graph, histogram, or so on. So it means that from your data that you would have collected in the first heading here, which is method of data collection, whatever you collect and you put in table, now you have to put those in some chart form, either bar chart or a graph or a pie chart, etc. All right, you should also introduce the graph. Don't just place it on the page and leave it like that. So every time you're putting in a chart or so on, you do an introduction. And in your introduction, give an idea what the chart is about. What is the chart for? Why are you putting in that chart? All right, the following graph, and this is an example here. The following graph shows, and you say whatever it shows. then you add the graph. So don't just put in the graph. You need to write something like this before you put in the graph. Say the following graph shows X, Y, Z, then insert the graph. If you are modeling data and looking for relationships of correlation, I am recommending that you use the software program graph. It is excellent at plotting scatter and can easily draw the best line of the best fit, the line of best fit or the spline. You can talk to the teacher about that. Now that can help you with your analysis. Now you also need to be accurate in the use of mathematical concepts while you present your data. So make sure that everything is accurately worked out. It is recommended that you use Microsoft Office or other spreadsheet program to generate your graph. CSEC does not want you to use the CSEC does not want you to use the technology that is available. Sorry, not does not, sorry. CSEC does want you to use the technology that is available. All right, so after you state what method you use to collect the data, then you present your data. The next thing that you want to do is to analyze your data. Now, as stated immediately above, this is a mathematical SBA. So you need to use the language of mathematics as well as use the mathematics concept in your analysis. So you must write in a coherent way. You do not need to be wordy. You only need to make sense of the data and write that understanding in a way so that the reader can understand what you mean. You should be detailed and you should be coherent. Try to answer the following question as you write. What is your data saying to you? What pattern do you see? What trend? Look at averages and compare the quantity using percentages. All right, so all of these now would add to your analysis. So having collected your data, presenting them in the table, putting them in your graph and charts, you should be able to look at these now and break them down and say, what is it saying to you? You should be able to say, what pattern do you see based on your graph? Look at averages. How can you find the average of, remember, if you're using, in statistics, you have 3 different types of averages. Now, by the time you are ready to write up some part of your SBA, we would have gone through some of these in statistics, all right? So hopefully, when you're writing up, you would have already gone through some statistical concepts so that you would know exactly how to write them, all right? So it's kind of like writing a statistical report. CSEC doesn't have these in English. CSEC doesn't have these in English A syllabus anymore, but your English teacher knows how and can help you. So ask for help if you don't know how. All right, so after you do your analysis, And so your analysis should answer these questions. Then you do your discussion. So discussions of finding. Now, so you have done your analysis. What exactly have you found out? So it may be what you thought you would have found out. That means if you make a declarative statement, what you found out, is it based on what you had thought? So it may be what you thought you would have found out. It may be different, but your work has shown something. What is it? Or what is that something that your work is showing? State it clearly and precisely. Please understand that your discussions of finding must follow from your data, your analysis of the data. So don't try to impress anyone by making claims that are not supported by the data that you have or by the analysis that you have done. So after you have done your analysis, now then you have next year conclusion. Now, relief. Finally, you have reached the end. Now, all you need to do is make a conclusion. You are good at this. After all, your language teacher did teach you how to do this. Now, regardless, just make a summary of what you would have done in the analysis of your data and in the discussion of your finding. That will be good enough. And finally, you do get marks for grammar and the use of English. So make sure to at least spell check your work. Yes, it should be tight. Make sure you create a content page. You definitely need a cover page with your personal center information. You will most likely use electronic submission. So save your documents, back it up somewhere, email it to yourself or a copy, etc. Just make sure that when your teacher needs it, you have it. And if you use a survey or questionnaire, etc., you can include those in the appendix at the end of the back of the project. Make sure your work is well organized. And remember, you have 1,000-word limits. So avoid being wordy and write clearly to the point. Your school-based assessment must include a cover page with the following information: name of school, territory, year of exam, subject, the group, leave out the space, candidate name, candidate number, title of the project, if applicable, name of the teacher who is supervising the project. All right, these are how the marks are allocated based on the various sections. So for the project title, if you give a clear and concise related project title, the allocation of the mark here is 1. So you get 1 mark for your project title. Your introduction, you get 4 marks for the introduction. But your introduction should include all of these. State the objective purpose of the SBA. What do you intend to find out from your investigation? Detail contents page with page number. Why are you doing this investigation? What? So all of these you should satisfy. Now you have method of data collection. You get 2 marks for that. Presentation of data, 5 marks. Analysis of data, 2 marks. Discussions of finding, 2 marks. Conclusion, 2 marks. Overall presentation, 2 marks. And the total marks will be 20. So your marks will be marked based on these criteria, and your marks will be out of 20. Any question? Is there any question about what is expected of you for the SBA? All right. Now, I know we are kind of at the time, but what I want to do, we are now at the time when we would normally stop, but I'm going to go a little further for the sake of your understanding. So what I want to do next now is to look at a sample of what your SBA should look like. So I'm going to stop sharing this. All right, so here we have a sample of what the SBA should look like. All right, this is what the sample guide would give you. All right, so here, this is an example of what your SBA title should look like. All right, now the topic here is that a number of persons have been, All right, so a number of persons have been requesting a sample of a mathematics SBA as a guide. This SBA is intended to be a sample guide and should not be copied and submitted as your own work. Now, the title